Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the UES Defiant. Through the large window, he could see the planet below. Orange flames covered most of the world's surface. Black smoke rose into the sky like dark clouds. Another world was dying. "Captain, we have survivors on board," said Commander Kate Sullivan. She walked up to Jake with a data pad in her hands. 300 people from the colony. Humans and aliens mixed together. They're hurt and scared. Jake nodded. He had seen too many refugee ships in the last 6 months. The war with the Saurian Empire was getting worse every day. Both sides were doing terrible things to each other. But Jake tried to save who he could. The communication system made a beeping sound. Admiral Lisa Hayes appeared on the main screen. Her face looked hard and cold. She wore her uniform perfectly, and her gray hair was pulled back tight. "Morrison," she said. Her voice was sharp like a knife. "I see you picked up more refugees. Again." "Yes, Admiral. 300 civilians from the colony before the Saurians hit it." Admiral Hayes shook her head. "Those people slow us down. We should have left them for the cleanup crews to find later. We're fighting a war, not running a charity." Jake felt his jaw tighten. "They're innocent people, Admiral. They did nothing wrong." "Innocent?" Hayes laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Captain, there are no innocent people in war. There are only the strong and the weak, the winners, and the dead." "I disagree, Admiral." Hayes leaned forward on the screen. Her eyes were like ice. "Listen to me carefully, Morrison. Mercy is a weakness. The Saurians kill everyone they find. They take no prisoners. They show no kindness. If we want to win this war, we must be stronger than them. We must be harder than them." Jake looked at the burning planet below. "What makes us different from them if we act the same way?" "Victory makes us different," Hayes said. "Dead heroes. Don't get to ask questions about right and wrong. Now, get those refugees to the nearest station and get back to the front lines. We have a war to win." The screen went black. Jake stood quietly for a moment. Around him, his crew worked at their stations. They had heard everything. Jake knew some of them agreed with the Admiral. Others looked uncomfortable. "Captain," said Lieutenant Sam Torres from the communication station, "we're getting a distress signal. It's weak, but it's there." "From where?" "About 2 hours away at best speed. It's a Saurian ship, sir." The bridge became very quiet. Everyone stopped working and looked at Jake. Commander Sullivan walked closer to him. "A trap?" she asked quietly. "Maybe," Jake said. "What does the signal say, Torres?" Torres looked at his screen. "It's basic distress code. Ship damaged. Life. Support failing. They're asking for help." "Saurians asking for help?" Sullivan said. "That doesn't sound right. They never surrender. They never ask for anything." Jake thought about this. In 3 years of war, no Saurian had ever asked humans for help. They fought until they died. They never gave up. They never showed fear. "Could be a trick," said Dr. Ben Carter. He was the ship's science officer and medic. But what if it's not? What if they really need help? "Then they should have thought about that before they started this war," said Lieutenant Martinez from the weapons station. "Let them die." Jake looked around his bridge. Half his crew wanted to ignore the signal. The other half looked unsure. He thought about Admiral Hayes and her words. Mercy is a weakness. "Torres, how many life signs on that ship?" "Scanning now." "Sir." Torres worked at his controls. "I'm reading. Maybe 20. Could be less. The ship is badly damaged." "What kind of ship?" "Small destroyer. Lightly armed. Looks like it got hit by something big." Jake made his choice. "Set course for the Saurian ship. Best speed." "Sir?" Sullivan looked surprised. The Admiral said to get back to the front lines. The Admiral isn't here, Jake said. I am, and I don't leave people to die in space, even enemies. Captain, Martinez said, what if this gets back to Hayes? She'll have you court-martialed. Jake smiled, but it was a sad smile. Maybe, but I'll still be able to sleep at night. 2 hours later, the Defiant found the Saurian ship floating dead in space. It was small and dark. Parts of it were missing. Jake could see holes in the hull where weapons had hit it. Life support is almost gone, Torres reported. They have maybe an hour of air left. Any other ships around? Jake asked. No, sir. We're alone out here. Jake looked at the damaged ship. On his screen, inside were his enemies. Creatures that had killed thousands of humans. Beings that showed no mercy to anyone. But they were also dying. Commander Sullivan, prepare a rescue team. Dr. Carter, get ready to treat wounded. Martinez, keep our weapons ready, but don't target them unless they fire first. Captain, Sullivan said quietly, are you sure about this? Jake nodded. Send the message. Tell them we're coming to help. Torres worked at his station. Message sent, sir. I'm telling them we're coming aboard to give medical aid. Any reply? Yes, sir. They're asking why. Jake looked at the screen. He thought about Admiral Hayes. He thought about mercy. Being weakness. He thought about the war and all the death he had seen. Tell them, Jake said slowly, because it's the right thing to do. The rescue took 4 hours. Jake's team found 18 surviving Saurians on the ship. Most were hurt badly. 3 were close to death. The Saurians looked like large lizards with sharp teeth and claws. They were covered in scales that changed color based on their emotions. Dr. Carter worked to save the wounded aliens. The Saurians watched him with large yellow eyes. They seemed confused. They had never seen enemies help them before. One young Saurian officer could speak human language. His name was Veltar. He had a deep cut on his arm, but he was alive. Why do you help? You? Veltar asked Jake. We are your enemies. Jake thought about the question. Because you needed help. But we would not help you. I know. Then why? Jake looked at the young alien. Because maybe that's what makes us different. Back on the Defiant, Jake put the Saurian survivors in a secure medical bay. Dr. Carter treated their wounds. The aliens were quiet and watchful. They ate the food they were given, but they always looked ready to fight. Veltar was the only one who would talk. He asked many questions about humans. He wanted to know why they helped enemies. He wanted to understand mercy. In my people's language, Veltar told Jake, there is no word for what you did. We have words for victory and defeat, for strength and weakness, but no word for helping an enemy. What would you call it? Jake asked. Veltar thought for a long time. Madness, maybe, or magic. Jake laughed. Maybe both. 3 days later, Jake got another message from Admiral Hayes. She had heard about the rescue. Her face on the screen was angry. Morrison, you disobeyed my direct orders. You wasted time and resources on enemy combatants. You put your crew at risk for worthless prisoners. They were dying, Admiral. Good. Let them die. That's the point of war, Captain. We kill them, they kill us, and whoever kills more wins. Hayes leaned closer to the camera. I'm tired of your bleeding heart, Morrison. Mercy is a weakness. It makes you soft. It makes your crew soft. Can soft people lose wars? Jake looked at the Admiral. Behind him, he could hear Dr. Carter working in the medical bay. The Saurian prisoners were getting better. Some were even starting to talk to the human doctors. What if you're wrong, Admiral? Jake said quietly. Wrong? About what? What if mercy isn't weakness? What if it's something else entirely? Admiral Hayes stared at him through the screen. You're walking a dangerous line, Captain. One more act of unauthorized kindness, and I'll have you removed from command. Do I make myself clear? Crystal clear, Admiral." The screen went black. Jake stood alone on his bridge. Outside, the stars looked cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the war continued. Ships burned. People died. And everyone said that mercy was weakness. But as Jake listened to Dr. Carter helping the Saurian prisoners, he wondered if Admiral Hayes might be wrong. He wondered if mercy might be the one thing that could end this war. He was about to find out. 2 weeks passed after Jake rescued the Saurian prisoners. The war moved to a new star system called the Kepler Sector. Every day brought news of more battles and more death. Both sides were getting more violent. Both sides were doing terrible things. Jake's ship, the Defiant, was part of a large fleet. But other captains started talking about him behind his back. They called him soft. They said he cared too much about enemies. Some said he was dangerous. The Saurian prisoners were still. On his ship, Dr. Carter had healed their wounds, but Jake could not let them go. Admiral Hayes would be angry if he freed them. But he could not hurt them either. Veltar, the young Saurian officer, spent time talking with Dr. Carter. He was learning about human ideas. He asked questions about why humans helped their enemies. "My people do not understand your ways," Veltar told Dr. Carter one day. "We are taught that only the strong survive. The weak must die or serve the strong. That is how life works." Double quotes Dr. Carter was checking Veltar's healing arm. But what if being strong means helping others? What if real strength is protecting those who cannot protect themselves? Veltar looked confused. That makes no sense. If you help the weak, you become weak too. Do you think I'm weak? Dr. Carter asked. Veltar thought about this. Dr. Carter had saved his life. The human doctor had worked for hours to heal Saurian wounds. He had been kind when he could have been cruel. "No," Veltar said slowly, "you are not weak. But I do not understand what you are." Meanwhile, Jake was getting new orders. The fleet was going to attack a Saurian supply base. Intelligence reports said the base held important information about Saurian war plans. The attack went wrong from the start. Jake's ship reached the supply base first. The Saurians were ready for them. They fought hard, but the human ships were stronger. After 2 hours of fighting, the Saurian defenders started to surrender. Jake watched on his screen as Saurian ships stopped firing. They sent surrender signals. They lowered their shields. It was the first time in the war that Saurians had given up instead of fighting to the death. "Captain," said Commander Sullivan, "the other fleet ships are moving in. They're targeting the surrendering ships." "What?" Jake looked at his screen. 3 human destroyers were powering up their weapons. "Torres, get me Captain Brooks on the Freedom." Captain Brooks appeared on screen. He was an older man with scars on his face. "What is it, Morrison?" "Captain, those Saurian ships have surrendered. You can't fire on them." Brooks laughed. "Watch." These lizards killed my brother at Proxima Station. Time for payback." "Captain, that's against Federation law. You cannot attack ships that have surrendered. Laws are for peacetime, Morrison. This is war." Jake watched in horror as the 3 human ships opened fire. The Saurian ships could not defend themselves. Their shields were down. Their weapons were off. They were destroyed one by one. "No!" Jake shouted, but it was too late. When the shooting stopped, over 200 Saurians were dead. They had tried to surrender, but no one cared. "Good work, Freedom," came Admiral Hayes' voice over the communication system. "Clean kills. No survivors to slow us down." Jake felt sick. "Admiral, those ships had surrendered." "So what, Morrison?" "Dead enemies can't fight back. Problem solved." "Admiral, this is wrong. They gave up. They were trying to end the fighting. And now the fighting is ended, Hayes said. Permanently. That's how you win wars, Captain. You kill the enemy until there are no enemies left. Jake looked around his bridge. His crew looked uncomfortable. Some looked angry. Others looked sad. But no one said anything. After the battle, Jake found more wounded survivors on the supply base. Both humans and saurians had been hurt in the fighting. He ordered Dr. Carter to treat everyone. "Sir," said Lieutenant Martinez, "Admiral Hayes said to leave the saurian wounded." "Admiral Hayes isn't here," Jake said. "Treat them all, Doctor." "Doctor." Carter nodded and went to work. He had human medics help him carry wounded saurians to the medical bay. Jake's crew worked together to save lives instead of taking them. One of the wounded saurians was an older officer named Kethron. He had been shot in the chest, but was still alive. As Dr. Carter worked to save him, the saurian looked up at Jake. "Why?" Kethron asked weakly. "Why do you help us?" Jake knelt down next to the medical bed. "Because you're hurt. But we are enemies. Right now, you're just someone who needs help." Kethron closed his eyes. "I do not understand humans." "Maybe." "That's okay," Jake said. "Maybe understanding comes later." Later that day, Jake got a priority message from Admiral Hayes. She appeared on his screen, looking very angry. "Morrison, I've been getting reports about your behavior. You're treating enemy wounded again. You're wasting medical supplies on aliens. And now I hear you're questioning other captains' tactics. Admiral, Captain Brooks fired on surrendering ships. That's against nothing." Hayes interrupted. "Brooks followed proper military procedure. Enemies who surrender can fight again later. Dead enemies stay dead. Admiral, if we don't accept surrenders, the saurians will never stop fighting. They'll fight to the death because they know we won't show mercy." Hayes stared at him through the screen. "Good. Let them fight to the death. It saves us the trouble of executing them later." Jake felt cold. "Is that really what we've become?" "We've become what we need to be to win this war. Strong, hard, unforgiving." Hayes leaned forward. "Mercy is a weakness, Morrison. I've told you this before. Every time you show kindness to the enemy, you encourage them to keep fighting." "What if the opposite is true?" Jake asked. "What if showing mercy makes them want to stop fighting?" Hayes laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "You're living in a dream world, Captain. The saurians are killers. They respect only strength. Show them weakness, and they'll destroy you." "Then why did they surrender today?" "For the first time in 3 years of war, they gave up instead of dying. That has to mean something. It means they were cowards," Hayes said. "And cowards deserve what they got." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "Those weren't cowards, Admiral. Those were soldiers who were tired of dying for nothing." "Careful, Captain. You're starting to sound like you sympathize with the enemy." "I sympathize with anyone who wants this war to end." Admiral Hayes stared at him for a long moment. "Captain Morrison, you are officially relieved of duty. Commander Sullivan will take command of the Defiant until I can find a proper replacement." Jake felt the words hit him like a punch. "Admiral, you can't." "I can, and I am." "You're too soft, Morrison. Too weak. You care more about enemy lives than human victory. That makes you dangerous to this fleet." The screen went black. Jake stood. On his bridge, no longer a captain. Around him, his crew stared in shock. Commander Sullivan looked like she wanted to cry. "Captain," she said quietly. "I mean ... Jake, this isn't right." "It's done, Kate," Jake said. "Take care of the crew. Take care of the prisoners. What will you do?" Jake looked out at the stars. "I don't know." But in the medical bay, something important was happening. Veltar was talking to the newly wounded saurian officer, Kethran. They were speaking in their own language, but Dr. Carter could understand some of it. He saved your life? Catherine was asking. Yes, the human captain. He rescued my ship when we were dying. But why? We are his enemies. I have been asking the same question for weeks, Veltar said. I think humans are different from us. Different how? They have something we do not have, something that makes them help their enemies. Catherine thought about this. What do you call this thing? Veltar had learned some human words. They call it mercy. But I think it might be something more. More? I think it might be strength. A kind of strength we have never seen before. Outside, the war continued. But inside the Defiant, something was changing. Saurians were learning about mercy. Humans were questioning orders. And Jake Morrison was beginning to understand that sometimes the greatest strength comes from showing kindness to those who expect cruelty. Admiral Hayes had taken away his command, but she could not take away his choice. To do what was right. The real test was still coming. Jake Morrison was no longer a captain, but he was still on the Defiant. Admiral Hayes had not found a replacement yet, so Commander Sullivan was in charge. She let Jake stay because the crew respected him more than any order from the Admiral. 3 weeks passed. The war was getting worse every day. The Federation fleet was preparing for something big. Rumors said they were going to attack the Saurian homeworld itself. It would be the final battle of the war. Jake spent his time in the medical bay with Dr. Carter and the Saurian prisoners. Veltar had become almost like a friend. The young Saurian was learning to speak human language better. He asked many questions about human culture. Your people are very strange, Veltar told Jake one day. You fight wars, but you also save your enemies. You could kill us, but you give us food and medicine. I do not understand this. Maybe that's what makes us human, Jake said, but it also makes you weak. My commander, Sethkara, would kill you all if he could. He shows no mercy. He takes no prisoners. That is how you win wars. Jake looked at the young alien. Has your commander ever won a war by being cruel? Veltar thought about this. He has won many battles, but has he ever ended a war? Has he ever made peace? Peace? Veltar looked confused. What is peace? When the fighting stops, when enemies become friends, when no one has to die anymore. Veltar shook his head. That is impossible. There are always enemies. There is always fighting. The strong rule, the weak serve. That is how life works. What if there was another way? There is no other way. But even as Veltar said this, Jake could see doubt in the alien's large yellow eyes. The Saurian was beginning to wonder if humans knew something his people did not. Dr. Carter had been studying the Saurian prisoners for weeks. He had learned many things about their culture. One day, he came to Jake with an important discovery. Jake, I need to show you something, Dr. Carter said. He led Jake to his laboratory. On the screen was information about Saurian society. Look at this, Dr. Carter said. The Saurians aren't naturally violent. Their aggression is learned. They're taught from birth that only the strong survive. They're told that mercy is weakness. They're programmed to be killers. Programmed? By who? That's the interesting part. From what I can tell from talking to Veltar and the others, their society was shaped by something called the Ancient Ones, some kind of ruling class that's been controlling them for thousands of years. Jake looked at the data. So they're not born evil. They're made that way. Exactly. And if they can be taught to be cruel, maybe they can be taught to be kind. Have you told anyone else about this? Dr. Carter shook his head. Who would believe it? Admiral Hayes thinks all aliens are monsters. Most of the crew thinks I'm wasting time studying prisoners. Jake thought about this information. If the Saurians could learn mercy, Maybe the war could end without destroying their entire species. Maybe there was another way. But first, he needed to talk to Admiral Hayes. Jake requested a meeting with the Admiral. She agreed to see him, but only by video call. When her face appeared on the screen, she looked tired and angry. "What do you want, Morrison?" "I'm busy planning the final assault on the Saurian home world." "Admiral, I have information that could change everything. The Saurians aren't naturally aggressive. They've been conditioned to be violent. If we could reach their civilians, show them mercy instead of destruction, we might be able to end this war without genocide." Admiral Hayes stared at him. "Genocide? We're not committing genocide, Morrison, or ending a threat to human civilization. By killing their entire species? If that's what it takes." Hayes leaned forward. "Morrison, I don't care if the Saurians are naturally peaceful or naturally violent. They've killed millions of humans. They've destroyed dozens of colonies. They've shown us no mercy, so they deserve none. But what if showing mercy could stop the killing? What if it could end the war?" Hayes laughed. "You're dreaming, Morrison. The only way to end this war is to win it completely. Total victory. Total destruction of the enemy. Admiral, what if you're wrong? What if there's another way?" "There is no other way," Hayes shouted. "Mercy is weakness. Kindness is failure. The only language these monsters understand is violence." Jake took a deep breath. "And let me prove you wrong." "What?" "Give me a small fleet. Let me try my way. If I fail, you can proceed with your plan. But if I succeed, you want me to risk ships and lives on your foolish mercy mission? I want you to risk a few ships to save millions of lives, both human and Saurian." Admiral Hayes stared at him for a long moment. "You're serious about this? Dead serious? And if I say no?" Jake looked directly into the camera. "Then I'll do it anyway." Hayes' face turned red with anger. "That would be mutiny, Morrison. That would be trying to save lives instead of destroying them. You can't go against direct orders from the Federation command. I can if those orders are wrong." For a moment, the two humans stared at each other through the screen. Hayes was everything the Federation military had become. Hard, cruel, focused only on victory. Jake represented something else. Hope, mercy, the belief that enemies could become friends. "You're making a big mistake, Morrison," Hayes said finally. "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. If you do this, you'll be branded a traitor. You'll be court-martialed. You might be executed." Jake nodded. "I understand." "And you're willing to risk that for a bunch of alien monsters?" "I'm willing to risk that to prove that mercy isn't weakness. I'm willing to risk that to show the galaxy that humans can be better than our worst instincts." Admiral Hayes was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke in a cold voice. "Fine. You want to try your mercy mission? I'll give you 3 ships, 3 small ships with volunteer crews. You have 72 hours before the main fleet attacks the Saurian homeworld. If you're not back by then, you'll be left behind." "Thank you, Admiral." "Don't thank me, Morrison. I'm giving you just enough rope to hang yourself. When your mercy mission fails, when your ships are destroyed and your crews are dead, I want everyone to remember that I warned you. Mercy is weakness, and weakness gets people killed." The screen went black. Jake stood alone in the communication room. He had just committed himself to an impossible mission. He was going to try to end a war with kindness instead of weapons. He was going to show mercy to enemies who had never shown mercy to humans. Most people would say he was crazy. Admiral Hayes certainly thought so. Maybe she was right. But Jake remembered Veltar's questions about human nature. He remembered the doubt in the young Saurian's eyes. He remembered Dr. Carter's discovery that the Saurians were taught to be cruel. If they could be taught cruelty, maybe they could learn mercy. Jake went to find Commander Sullivan. She was on the bridge, looking out at the stars. "Kate," he said, "I need to ask you something important." "What is it?" "How would you like to help me save the galaxy?" Sullivan looked at him. "With you? Always. Even if it means disobeying Admiral Hayes? Even if it means being branded traitors?" Sullivan smiled for the first time in weeks. "Especially then." "Good, because we're about to do something that will either end this war or get us all killed." "What's the mission?" Jake looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was the Saurian home world. Somewhere out there were millions of aliens who had been taught that mercy was weakness. He was about to show them something different. "We're going to prove that mercy can be the strongest weapon of all." Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant, but he was no longer alone. 2 other ships had joined him, the U.S. Hope and the U.S. Courage. All 3 ships were small, but their crews had volunteered to follow Jake on his impossible mission. "Commander." Sullivan was still officially in charge of the Defiant, but everyone knew Jake was leading this mission. He had asked for volunteers, and almost his entire crew had stayed with him. They believed in him more than they feared Admiral Hayes. "Captain," said Lieutenant Torres, "we're approaching the Saurian home system. Long-range sensors show massive defenses. Hundreds of ships, weapon platforms, shield generators." Jake nodded. He had expected this. The Saurians would defend their homeworld with everything they had. "Any sign of Admiral Hayes' fleet?" "Not yet, sir. But they're only 12 hours behind us." Jake looked at his crew. These people had risked their careers to follow him. They trusted him to find a way to end the war without destroying an entire species. "All hands, this is Jake Morrison," he said into the ship's communication system. "In a few hours, we're going to try something that's never been done before. We're going to offer mercy to an enemy that's never known mercy. We're going to try to end a war with kindness instead of weapons." He paused, looking around the bridge. "I won't lie to you. This might not work. We might all die today, but if we succeed, we might save millions of lives, both human and Saurian." "Sir?" came a voice from the engineering section. "We're with you." "All the way, Captain," said another voice from the medical bay. Jake smiled. "Then let's go show the galaxy what humans are really made of." The 3 ships moved toward the Saurian homeworld, Sethric Prime. It was a large planet with red skies and purple oceans. Cities covered most of the land, and millions of Saurians lived there. As they got closer, alarms started going off. Saurian defense ships moved to intercept them. Weapon platforms targeted them. A massive fleet began forming between Jake's ships and the planet. "Captain," said Commander Sullivan, "we're being hailed by the Saurian fleet. Their commander wants to talk." "Put him on screen." The face that appeared was frightening. The Saurian commander had dark green scales, sharp teeth, and bright red eyes. Scars covered his face and neck. This was Zethkara, the most feared Saurian military leader. "Human ships," Zethkara said in a deep, growling voice. "You are in Saurian space. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Jake stepped forward. "Commander Zethkara, I am Jake Morrison. I'm here to talk." Zethkara laughed, but it sounded like a roar. "Talk? Humans do not talk. Humans kill, just as we kill. What if I told you there was another way? Another way to what? Another way to end this war without more death, without more destruction." Zethkara stared at Jake through the screen. "You speak strangely human. What do you want?" "I want to help your people." The Saurian commander looked confused. "Help us? You are our enemies." "We don't have to be." "Of course we do. You are weak. We are strong. That is how the universe works." Jake thought about Veltar and the other prisoners on his ship. They had been learning about mercy for weeks now. They were beginning to understand. That strength could mean more than just violence. "Commander," Jake said, "I have some of your people on my ship. They were wounded prisoners, but we healed them. We fed them. We treated them with respect." "Impossible. You lie." "Would you like to speak with them?" Sethkara's eyes narrowed. "Show me." Jake nodded to Torres, who switched the signal to the medical bay. Veltar appeared on screen, along with several other Saurian prisoners. "Commander Zethkara," Veltar said in the Saurian language, "I am alive." Zethkara spoke rapidly in Saurian. Jake couldn't understand the words, but he could hear the shock in the commander's voice. Veltar responded, also in Saurian. He talked for several minutes. Jake could see Zethkara's expression changing from anger to confusion to something that might have been fear. Finally, Zethkara switched back to human language. "Veltar says you saved his life. He says you gave medical aid to wounded prisoners. He says you showed ... mercy." "That's right. But why? We are your enemies. Because you needed help." Zethkara was quiet for a long moment. "This makes no sense. If you show mercy to enemies, you become weak. Weak beings die." "What if the opposite is true?" Jake asked. "What if showing mercy makes you strong?" "Impossible. Then let me prove it to you." Before Zethkara could respond, alarms started going off on both the human and Saurian ships. Torres looked at his instruments with wide eyes. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures. It's Admiral Hayes' fleet. They're coming out of hyperspace. Right behind us." On the screen, space filled with human warships. Hundreds of them. The entire Federation fleet had arrived for the final battle. Admiral Hayes' voice came over the communication system. "Morrison, get your ships out of the way. We're here to finish this war." Jake looked at Zethkara on the screen. The Saurian commander's face had gone from confusion to rage. "You lied, human. This was a trick to get close to our defenses." "No," Jake said quickly. "I didn't know they would follow so close behind us. This isn't what I planned." But Zethkara had already cut the communication. The Saurian fleet began moving into attack formation. Admiral Hayes contacted Jake directly. "Morrison, you had your chance to play with mercy. Now move aside and let real soldiers finish this job. Admiral, please, give me more time. I think I can make this work, you think? Morrison, there are millions of human lives depending on ending this threat. I won't risk them on your feelings." Jake watched as both fleets prepared for battle. In a few minutes, the shooting would start. Thousands of ships would fight. Millions of beings would die, unless he could find another way. "Admiral," Jake said, "what if I could end this without a battle? What if I could get the Saurians to surrender without firing a shot?" Hayes laughed. "Impossible. These monsters don't surrender. Some of them did. At the supply base, they tried to give up. And look what happened to them." Jake had an idea. It was crazy and dangerous, but it might work. "Admiral, give me 1 hour. 1 hour to prove that mercy can end wars." 1 hour to get yourself killed, you mean? Maybe. But if I succeed, you won't have to destroy their entire planet. Admiral Hayes was quiet for a moment. "Fine. 1 hour, Morrison. But when you fail, I'm going to finish this my way." Jake looked at his crew. They were scared but determined. They believed in him. "Torres, open a channel to the Saurian fleet. All frequencies." "Channel open, sir." Jake took a deep breath. What he was about to do had never been tried before in the history of warfare. "This is Jake Morrison, to all Saurian ships and all human ships. I'm going to do something that both sides will think is crazy. I'm going to prove that mercy isn't weakness. I'm going to show you how mercy can end wars. He looked at Commander Sullivan. Kate, take us between the two fleets. Sir? You heard me. Take us right into the middle, between the humans and the Saurians. Sullivan looked scared, but she nodded. Yes, sir. The Defiant moved forward, with the hope and courage following. 3 small ships moved into the space between 2 massive fleets. On all sides, weapons were pointed at them. Jake opened the communication. Channel again. To both fleets. If you want to start shooting, you'll have to shoot through us first. The silence that followed was complete. No one moved. No one fired. Jake Morrison had just put his ships directly in the line of fire of the 2 largest fleets in the galaxy. Now he had to prove that mercy was stronger than any weapon. 3 small human ships floated in space between 2 massive fleets. On one side were hundreds of human warships, ready to destroy the Saurian home world. On the other side were hundreds of Saurian defenders, ready to die protecting their planet. In the middle were Jake Morrison and his crew, betting their lives that mercy could stop a war. Captain, said Commander Sullivan quietly, both fleets have us targeted. If either side fires ... We're dead, Jake finished. I know. Lieutenant Torres looked at his communication board. Sir, we're getting messages from both fleets. Admiral Hayes is ordering us to move. The Saurians are demanding we surrender. Jake thought about everything that had led to this moment. The refugees he had saved, the prisoners he had helped. Veltar learning about mercy. Dr. Carter discovering that Saurians were taught to be cruel. Torres open a channel to both fleets. And to the planet below. All channels open, sir. Jake stepped forward and began to speak. His words were broadcast to every ship, every station, and every city on Sethric Prime. My name is Jake Morrison. 3 years ago, a war started between humans and Saurians. Both sides have killed. Both sides have suffered. Both sides have learned to hate. He paused, looking around his bridge at the crew who had risked everything to follow him. But I've learned something different. I've learned that Saurians and humans aren't so different. We both want to protect our families. We both want our children to be safe. We both want the killing to stop. Admiral Hayes' voice cut in on the communication channel. Morrison, get out of there now. You have 30 seconds before I order all ships to fire. Admiral, wait, let me finish. No more delays. Move your ships. Jake looked at the screen showing Admiral Hayes. Her face was red with anger. Behind her, he could see the bridge of her flagship, filled with officers ready for battle. Admiral, Jake said calmly, what if I could end this war right now? What if I could get the Saurians to surrender without destroying their planet? Impossible. Give me 5 minutes to prove it. Hayes stared at him. You have gone completely insane. Maybe, but I'm not wrong about this. Jake switched the communication channel to speak directly to the Saurian fleet. Commander Zethkara, can you hear me? The Saurian commander's face appeared on screen. He looked angry and confused. Human, you are either very brave or very stupid. Both, probably. Commander, you've heard what Admiral Hayes said. In a few minutes, hundreds of human warships are going to attack your planet. Your people will fight bravely, but you cannot win. Too many Saurians will die. Then we will die with honor. What if there was another choice? There is no other choice. We fight or we surrender. If we surrender, you will kill us anyway. Jake shook his head. No, if you surrender, I promise you will be treated with respect. Your people will be safe. Your children will live. Zethkara laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Promises from enemies mean nothing. Then let me show you what human promises are worth. Jake turned to Commander Sullivan. Kate, lower our shields. Sir, lower our shields. Power down our weapons. Sullivan looked scared. Captain, if we do that, we'll be defenseless. Anyone could destroy us. That's the point. Jake turned back to the communication screen. Commander Zethkara, Admiral Hayes. I'm ordering my ships to lower shields and power down weapons. We are now completely defenseless. You're making yourself an easy target, Zethkara said. No, I'm making myself proof that humans can be trusted. Admiral Hayes' voice came over the channel again. Morrison, raise your shields immediately. That's a direct order. I can't do that, Admiral. Why not? Because I'm about to do something. That will either save millions of lives or get us all killed. Jake took a deep breath and spoke to both fleets again. I'm going to tell you something that neither side wants to hear. This war started because both sides were afraid. Humans were afraid of Saurian strength. Saurians were afraid of human expansion. Fear made us enemies. He looked directly at the camera. But fear is a choice, and so is mercy. Jake nodded to Dr. Carter, who was standing nearby. Doctor, bring our Saurian friends to the bridge. A few minutes later, Veltar and the other Saurian prisoners walked onto the bridge. They were not in chains. They were not guarded. They walked freely. Zethkara stared at the screen in shock. Veltar? What is this? Veltar stepped forward. Commander, these humans saved my life. They healed my wounds. They fed me when I was hungry. They showed me kindness when they could have shown cruelty. But why? Because, Veltar said slowly, they believe that mercy is not weakness. They believe it is strength. Zethkara looked confused. I do not understand. Neither did I, Veltar said. But I have learned something important. When someone shows you mercy, it does not make them weak. It makes you want to be better. Jake stepped forward again. Commander Zethkara, I'm going to prove to you that mercy can end wars. I'm releasing all Saurian prisoners. They are free to go home. What? You heard me. Veltar and the others can take a shuttle back to your fleet. No conditions. No deals. They're free. Admiral Hayes' voice exploded over the communication channel. Morrison, have you lost your mind? Those are valuable prisoners. They're people, Admiral. And people should be free. Jake looked at Veltar. You can go home. All of you, tell your people what you've learned here. Veltar stared at Jake. You would really let us go? Even though we are your enemies? You're not my enemies anymore. You're proof that enemies can become friends. Veltar was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked everyone. He bowed to Jake, the way Saurians showed respect to their leaders. Jake Morrison, Veltar said, you have taught me that strength comes in many forms. The strength to show mercy is the greatest strength of all. Zethkara watched this through the communication screen. His expression was changing from anger to confusion to something else, something that might have been understanding. Veltar, Zethkara said, come back to the fleet. Tell me more about what you have learned. As the Saurian prisoners prepared to leave, Jake made one more announcement to both fleets. Admiral Hayes, Commander Zethkara, you both think mercy is weakness. But I'm going to show you something different. I'm going to show you how mercy can end wars. Jake turned to his crew. Send a message to the planet below. Tell all Saurian civilians that human medical ships are coming to help anyone who needs aid. Tell them we're bringing food, medicine, and supplies. Tell them we come in peace. Admiral Hayes' face appeared on the screen. She looked furious. Morrison, I forbid you to give aid to the enemy. They're not the enemy anymore, Admiral. Yes, they are. They're aliens. They're monsters. Jake looked at Admiral Hayes calmly. No, Admiral. They're people, just like us. Something strange began to happen. On the planet below, Saurian cities began broadcasting messages. The civilian population had heard Jake's offer of help. They were asking their own military to stop fighting. Zethkara received a communication from the planet. Jake could see the Saurian commander's face changing as he listened. "The civilians," Zethkara said slowly. "They want to accept your offer of aid. Then let them. But this has never happened before. Enemies do not help enemies. They do know." Admiral Hayes was furious. "Morrison, if you give aid to Saurians, you'll be court-martialed for treason." Jake looked at her through the screen. "Admiral, 3 years ago you told me that mercy is weakness. Today I'm proving you wrong." "How?" "Watch." Jake ordered his ships to begin broadcasting messages of peace to the planet. Dr. Carter sent medical supply lists. Engineers offered to help repair damaged cities. Teachers offered to share knowledge. On Sethrock Prime, something amazing happened. For the first time in their history, Saurians experienced mercy from their enemies. The response was immediate. Saurian civilians began coming out of their cities, not to fight, but to meet the humans who offered help. Saurian soldiers began putting down their weapons. Saurian commanders began asking their superiors to consider peace. Zethkara watched his entire military structure begin to change. His soldiers were no longer thinking about death and victory. They were thinking about life and peace. "This is impossible," Zethkara said. "You have done something to my people." "Yes," Jake said. "I showed them kindness. But kindness is weakness." "No, Commander. Kindness is evolution. It's choosing to be better than our worst instincts." Admiral Hayes was watching the same thing Jake was watching. Saurian ships were powering down their weapons. Defense platforms were going offline. An entire civilization was choosing peace over war. "How?" Hayes asked quietly. "Because mercy works, Admiral. It doesn't just end wars. It prevents them." Jake looked at both commanders through the screen. "Admiral Hayes, Commander Zethkara, you. Both have a choice. You can start shooting and kill millions of people, or you can choose to be better than that." Zethkara was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "Jake Morrison, you have shown my people something we have never seen before. You have shown us that enemies can become friends. That strength can mean helping instead of hurting." The Saurian commander took a deep breath. "I surrender my fleet to you. Not because I am defeated, but because I choose peace over war." Admiral Hayes stared at the screen in shock. "They're surrendering? The entire Saurian fleet?" "Not surrendering," Jake said. "Choosing peace." Hayes looked at Jake for a long moment. "How did you know this would work?" "I didn't, but I knew that hatred only creates more hatred. Fear only creates more fear. The only way to break the cycle was to try something different. Mercy, mercy." Admiral Hayes was quiet for a very long time. Then she spoke in a voice that was different from before. Softer, more human. "Stand down all weapons," she ordered her fleet. "Prepare medical and supply ships for humanitarian aid to Sethrock Prime." "Admiral?" one of her officers asked. Hayes looked at Jake through the screen. "Captain Morrison has just taught us something important. He's shown us that mercy isn't weakness. It's wisdom." Jake smiled. "Thank you, Admiral." "No, Captain, thank you." 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood on the surface of Sethrock Prime. Around him, humans and Saurians worked together to rebuild cities damaged by the war. Children of both species played together in the streets. Valtar had become the first Saurian ambassador to the Human Federation. He worked with Dr. Carter to help other alien species learn about mercy and peace. Admiral Hayes had changed the entire Federation military doctrine. Instead of peace through strength, the new motto was peace through understanding. Jake watched a group of human and Saurian engineers working together to build a new hospital. He thought about the day when Admiral Hayes had told him that mercy was weakness. She had been wrong. Mercy wasn't weakness at all. Mercy was the strongest force in the universe. It could end wars, heal wounds, and turn enemies into friends. And sometimes that was the greatest victory of all.